Hi, good morning. Welcome back to another month of PBHU. My name is Callie Boyer. I'm the Director of Marketing here for Promises. Normally, I would have my screen shared with you all, and we would be talking through some slides as we wait for everyone to join us. We are having a few technical difficulties. Darylyn is working behind the scenes to get her presentation back up and running. We all know how Zoom goes. As soon as you're ready to hit start, something breaks. I just want to say welcome and thank you for pivoting with us this morning as I speak to you about what we're going to be introducing today about motivational interviewing. This is part two of our webinar series. So if you were with us last month, we're hoping to continue that conversation today. And then if you are new to PBHU, welcome. You did not have to be a part of part one to be here today. I think Darylyn will be going over some of the history and what she covered last month so that we're all on the same page. But as we're letting everyone join, if you are new to Promises, PBHU, you can put in where you are joining us from in the chat. We love to know how you found us, where you're joining us from. And I will get into more of the chat, the Q&A, and everything as we continue on. So as a reminder, your microphone is turned off, your camera is turned off, and all you have to do is sit back and relax. I will continue to say this, but you will receive the recording and our presentation slides next week. So don't worry about taking a ton of notes today. Obviously, all those like juicy nuggets that Darylyn will give us, you're welcome to note those down, but you will receive the slides. So okay, as I can continue on here again, we are speaking about motivational interviewing today from collaboration or from confrontation to collaboration, and this is part two of our series. First, I'm going to introduce Darylyn, and I'm going to, make this a little different than how I worded it last month, since you all hopefully know who she is at this point. Okay, but I am really happy to introduce Darylyn today. She's our program director for the Right Step in Houston, and she brings over 15 years of experience as a licensed chemical dependency counselor, along with a master's degree in human resources management. As a side note, 15 years of experience is incredible. The Right Step Houston has actually been around since 1990, so there's just a lot of longevity within our clinical program at that location, and I'm really excited that Darylyn gets to speak to you all today because she is such a near and dear resource to Promises and has been for so long. Is especially passionate about fostering trauma-informed care, a focus that has shaped early in her career while working in a therapeutic community within the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Since joining the Right Step in 2016, she's continued to lead with that same commitment and intention. She's also a proud member of the recovery community and celebrated 16 years in her bonus life, which she speaks so positively of and gives so much perspective as she brings to this work. So, beyond her role in programming, she also serves as a corporate trainer for PBH. That's why she's so great at speaking, and she specializes in our Handle with Care program that is deeply involved within the training and development department that we have. Outside of her professional work, Darylyn is a Chicago native and a big sports enthusiast. She keeps up with both Chicago and Houston teams. So there's the Bears, the Texans, the Bulls, the Rockets, and the White Sox and Astros. And yes, I did have to look all those up because I'm not a sports person. Um, so we're really glad that she's back. Darylyn, thank you so much. I know that coming on for part two was not a part of the plan. So I'm really, really happy to have you back. And I know everyone here is also excited to see you again. So, yes. Now I'm going to speak a bit about promises. So I would typically speak about promises in the way of where we're located, what our programs offer at each location. But since I know so many of you were here last month, and you've also heard me speak about this before if you've been a part of PBHU for over the last almost 3 years we've been doing this, I just wanted to give you all a little more insight into the treatment that we give and the tools that we like to equip people with, and not just where our locations are and how you can find us. Because I think it's really important to, as clinicians, you all know that building that sustainable, meaningful life in recovery requires equipping people with tools for the long term, for the long road ahead. And so what we often see is that it's not the lack of desire to get better. Everyone shows up for the most part really wanting to change. Um, but they just don't have those tools to regulate their emotions, navigate relationships, and tolerate discomfort. So reconnecting with a sense of purpose is like really what it's all about. Our programming is intentionally designed around helping clients developing those core capabilities. So first, when they come into treatment with promises, and this is true across all seven of our locations, we're in 5 states: Texas, Tennessee, Georgia, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania. So when they come in, they're really going to be focused heavily on emotional regulation and distress tolerance. So many of our clients come in without reliable ways to manage their overwhelming feelings, whether that's anxiety, shame, grief, anger. So through modalities like DBT, mindfulness practices, and experiential therapies, when appropriate, we help clients learn how to sit with those emotions without needing to just escape them. And then we help them build relational tools. So healing doesn't just happen in isolation, in independent individual therapy, which we do offer. It also happens in connection, in those groups, in the structured homes that they are in. They get to work on those communication skills. Boundary setting is a big one, and really just rebuilding trust, not just with others within themselves, but that happens in the connection with others. So whether that's again through group therapy, family involvement, we offer family webinars now every month. And also community-based experiences, the clients kind of begin to understand how to show up differently in relationships and honor themselves through that as well. From there, we also like to emphasize self-awareness and insight. So through individual therapy and evidence modalities, clients start to understand the why behind their behaviors. So what's driving them, what patterns they're kind of stuck in, and how to interrupt those cycles in a meaningful way. Recovery just isn't about what happens only in therapy. We know this. Another key piece is helping clients establish that daily structure and life skills. So when someone is going to be living their day-to-day life after treatment, how do they start to know to build those routines on their own, practice accountability on their own, and developing habits for that long-term success? And that just involves things like mindfulness, movement, nutrition. Um, it's not just about the absence of those symptoms, it's knowing that those symptoms are going to be present in their life and that is still going to be worth living and working through on their own. So I think that what we do here is really meaningful. And while, everyone does something maybe a little bit different, I do believe that within our promises continuum of care, we are so dedicated, obsessed with understanding people and how we can help them continue to grow and better their lives after treatment. That at the end of the day, our goal is really simple. When a client leaves promises, they don't just feel better that day, they feel very equipped and they have a toolkit that they can rely on. They have themselves that they know they can rely on, even when life gets hard. And that I think is what allows our recovery to last. So, if you have any questions or want to learn more about our programming within individual facilities, they do have their own flair. I'd be happy to share information, set you up with a tour, set you up with one of our other like clinical folks within those programs. If you want to speak to them directly, you can email pbhu@promises.com. That email goes to me, and I'm happy to give you any information that you need. Okay, so to move on from promises, we want to talk about the webinar. Okay, so you have two icons on your screen. One is the chat box, one is the Q&A. We like to keep those separate because the chat box is where like you just were putting in where you're showing up today from. It's going to be questions or feedback for me around technology, Zoom. Hey, I need to switch to another computer, whatever it is. You can put that there. You can also, send messages around if Darilyn asks a question, like who has had this experience. It's where we can kind of be a little more interactive. You can leave that in the chat. We like to keep Q&A separate purely for those questions around content for Darilyn because things will get lost in the chat. So we will have two opportunities that she'll come to a few moments to get to questions, and that's where she'll look to the Q&A. So keep those questions about the content for Darilyn. Everything else can go in the chat. And I will be in the chat the whole time if you have, again, any questions for me or about PBHU. So our CE process, I know many of you are here for CEs today. Um, and really, if you're already here, you're in the right place. So we ask that you try not to miss more than 10 minutes of the webinar for you to receive that full credit. And it's also important to know that it's one device per user. So if you're sitting in a conference room with your coworkers right now, whoever signed in and is using their computer is the one getting credit. So if you all need credit, you need to have a device open so you're registered, signed in, and we can count that later. Now, if you need to move from your computer to your phone, back to your computer, Zoom will follow you. No worries about that. So after the training, you'll go to your CEGO dashboard, and just like how you received an email reminding you to show up today, you'll receive another email after, and that will say, hey, here's your eval. You fill this out, you've passed, and then from there, you'll immediately just be noted that your certificate is in your dashboard. So ideally, if you're going to be returning to our programs, all of your certificates will be in that one place, which is really nice. Um, and again, you're getting to see credits issued through NADAC and NBCC. All other source material, your slides, your recording will be in your dashboard next week. Okay, so next month with PBHU, we have the hidden influences on pain care, cognitive bias, and equitable treatment strategies. So this one is going to be led by our Director of Medical Compliance and Quality Assurance. And I think this one is really important because, as we know, it can be a little uncomfortable to talk about pain care and that underbelly of treatment, right? So this one's really going to just crack open all the transparencies that we can give you to speak on managing those strategies and being as equitable as we can be with our clients. So join us for that one. It's on Friday, June 26th. Our webinars are always on the fourth Friday of the month at 9 a.m. Central Time. So it will be June 26th. And I will drop that registration link in the chat right after this. We also have, because we changed it up this month, this was supposed to be an ethics webinar that got moved to August. We were able to add a second ethics webinar. So that one will be in July. So July and August will be having two ethics opportunities. If you need those separate CE credits, those are coming this summer. So hopefully you can join us then if you have a need for the ethics with CEs. And the last thing I want to just note is that, like I mentioned, we are offering free family webinars. This is not just for folks that are attached to promises. If you are sitting there and have a client that has a family with a lot of questions, they want to know how they can support their loved one better. We offer webinars that are just like this, just only they're shorter. They're about an hour and it's a little more casual. No Cs are offered, but those families can come in and learn about, window of tolerance, codependency, all the things that might help as they start relating to their loved one, either in addiction, in treatment, or in recovery. And those are also followed up by support groups. So the week after our webinars, our clinical director or executive director, Bill over at Promise Atlanta, he sits and the families just come with questions. It can be around admissions, around insurance, around anything that we've talked about up to that point. It's just an open forum for families to come in and ask those questions. So I think that's been a really great resource to people. And if we can offer it to you and extend it to your folks, we're more than happy to do that. So again, I'll drop a registration link to those as well. Okay, Darylyn, I get to pass this over to you now. Everyone, thank you for being here. Thank you for understanding a little bit of adjustment that we're making this morning. And I will be in the chat if you need me. Darylyn, take it away.
So up to this point, we've pretty much talked about the models. We in part one, we reviewed the models, we reviewed the history, and we reviewed the research that went into it. Now we're going to start talking about how motivational interviewing actually feels to a client. Okay, so we all agree that empathy is the foundation of motivational interviewing, not sympathy and not agreement, but empathy as understanding. And what empathy means is that we are really trying to see the world through the client's eyes, without judgment, without correcting, and without fixing them. When people feel understood, they become more open to change. So this is when we reinforce the fact that motivational interviewing is not something that we do to clients. It's something that we do with them. Instead of directing the conversation, we explore it together, and we move from being an expert in this to actually becoming a partner. We do have things to offer, but it's not all about us showing what we know and telling them what we believe will work for them. So, an example of how we could say this would be, instead of saying, you need to stop using, we can ask, help me to understand what role this use plays in your life. People are far more likely to believe what they say than what we tell them. And one of the most important principles in MI that we need to focus on is that the client has the right to choose, which is also one of the principles or the ethics in counseling itself. And that is respecting the autonomy of the clients that we work with. What that means is that even if we don't agree, even if we're concerned, we always respect their autonomy. And the paradox in this is that the more we try to control, the more resistance we get. But when we support autonomy, we reduce resistance and we increase the client's level of engagement. So when we combine empathy, collaboration, and autonomy, what we're creating is a place where people feel safe enough to be honest and strong enough to actually consider change. It's not such a scary thing anymore. We're not telling them that they need to adopt a totally different set of principles and way of living that may seem totally foreign to them. So, how do we actually do this in conversation? And this is where we start talking about the core motivational interviewing skills, the ORs. That's where those come in. So we are going to do really quickly. We're going to review some of the things that we did last time and drop in the chat just to kind of challenge yourself and to let me make sure that everybody's with me. And I'm sure that you are, because how could you not just memorize everything that we did in part one, right? So moving into the core skills, the ORs, we are going to practice them live like we did before. And this is where we say, the first question being, I'm going to demonstrate two approaches using a common client scenario. We went through this last time. So a client says, I know my drinking is causing problems, but I'm not sure I want to stop. Okay. Some things that we could say is, you really need to stop. It's clearly a problem. Or have you tried avoiding situations where you drink? So in the chat, what did you notice about the things, the comments that I just made? Black and white, confrontational, no open-ended question was used, overtly directive, heard a lot of judgment, not very empathetic at all, and definitely not meeting the client where they are. Exactly. So when we use the motivational interviewing approach, using the ORs, some of the questions we would say would be, well, what do you enjoy about drinking? And what concerns you, what actually concerns you about this? So you notice that these are not yes, no questions. We're actually opening up a space. And what it does, if we use reflective listening, right? We could say instead, it helps you relax. And at the same time, you're still starting to see some consequences. So I'm not fixing them. I'm just reflecting what it is that they actually said. With affirmations, some things that we could say in this situation would be, it really takes a lot of honesty to be able to say that or to be able to acknowledge that. Another thing that we could say to affirm them could be, you're really paying attention to what's going on with you. When we do that, we're actually affirming the effort and not the outcomes. An example of summarizing. So drinking helps you unwind, but it's also starting to create some problems. And what I'm hearing you say is that you're really not sure what you want to do yet. Did I get that right? So type in the chat, what felt different about that second approach? Using the open-ended questions, using the affirmations, using the reflective listening, and also the summarizing. Normalizing that they are how they're feeling. It's exploring it's more of a dialogue, much softer and empathetic. It encourages them to be self-aware. Gathering information, I like that. It is empathetic, and we're also gathering information. Then that really helps us to see exactly where they are in that stage of change. A lot of collaboration. Makes them the expert on themselves. Okay. Empowering, validating, and allowing clients to assess themselves. Those are all great responses. So now we're going to talk about change talk versus sustained talk. Um, it's just learning to hear what the client is telling us about change. So clients are always telling us two things at the same time, right? Why they might change and why they might not. Okay, so change talk. Those are statements that move forward change. For example, I want to feel better. I need to do something different. I know this is affecting my family. Sustained talk, those are the statements that keep things the same. It helps me relax. I've tried before, but it just doesn't work. I don't think what I'm doing is that bad. Both of these are normal, okay? Change talk and sustained talk. Neither one is bad. So I'm going to read maybe two of the statements, not as many as I did last time, just so that we can get into a little bit more practice about identifying this. I know this is starting to affect my job. Change talk or sustained talk? Change talk, exactly. It's the only thing that helps me cope. Change talk or sustained talk? Sustained talk. A few other examples for change talk. I guess I could try cutting back. Or even, my family is really worried about me. One definite sustained talk, I don't think I'm ready to stop. That's pretty pretty direct. That they're pretty much going to kind of dig their heels in just a little bit. So now let's make it more realistic, because clients rarely speak in one direction. They typically, we sometimes actually need a map to kind of follow them. But this is one of the things that I love about motivational interviewing, if we know what it is that we're listening for. So we've got the statement, I know drinking is causing problems, but it's also the only way that I relax. What are you hearing? Change talk or sustained talk? Both. Exactly. And I see in the chat a couple of times exactly what it is that we're hearing with both is what we call ambivalence. And this is the part with motivational interviewing where we actually can help to guide the clients. What we choose to respond to is what we strengthen. If we argue with the sustained talk, we get more sustained talk. But if we reflect the change talk, then we're going to get more change talk. So what we reflect is what we reinforce. I know this is affecting my health, but I'm not ready to stop. Okay. So one reflective response that actually leads toward change talk could be, so part of you is recognizing that this isn't sustainable, or you're noticing the impact even if you're not ready to change yet. So notice what we're doing. We are not arguing with the not ready part. We're strengthening the change side. So instead of asking, how do I get them to change? What we're doing is, what change language is already there and how do we begin to build on it? So the skills that we just used, reflecting, affirming, those are the same or skills, except that now we're doing it with direction. Okay. So we're not creating motivation. What we're doing is we are evoking what is already there. They've already got something in there, right? We're just drawing it out of them. At the heart of motivational interviewing is the deep belief in the client's ability to change, not because we tell them to, but because we help them recognize it in themselves. So we talked about respecting autonomy. We've talked about validating the client's strengths. We've talked about promoting motivation and commitment. And what we're trying to do is to support lasting change. So what we have come to learn in this is that change isn't a single moment, it's an actual process. And when we use motivational interviewing, it helps us to stay engaged in that process, even though there may be setbacks, even through ambivalence, and even through uncertainty. When a client relapses, what we have to remember is that it's not a failure and that they're not failures. It's actually feedback. So our role is not to keep them from falling, it's to help them get back up differently. When we combine all of these, the autonomy, the strengths, the motivation, and the support, what we are actually creating now is a client who believes, I can do this. So now our question is this: how do we consistently bring out that belief in our conversations with the client? And that's where the skills and the strategies come together. And like we said before, people don't change because we convince them that they need to. They change because they begin to believe it and to believe in themselves that it is possible. The difference between affirmations and praise, right? Both are positive, affirmations and praise. Both are well intended, but they land very differently with our clients. Affirmations are a core motivational interviewing skill. They focus on who the client is and not just what they did. They highlight effort, strengths, and values. You've been really persistent in trying to repair that relationship. That affirmation was specific, it was strength-based persistence, and it's client-owned. Affirmations build self-efficacy, the belief, I can do this. Praise, on the other hand, comes from a different place. Sometimes it sounds like, hey, you're doing great. I'm proud of you. Good job. And what it does is that unintentionally, it puts us in the position of being the evaluator. And when a client feels evaluated, they may seek approval. they may become dependent on that approval. And if they struggle, they may feel that they're being judged. Okay. Affirmations say you have what it takes, where praise says, I approve of what you did. So, in the chart or in your mind, which one do you tend to use more? Affirmations or praise? Unfortunately, praise, both affirmations. Okay. Affirmations, but I'm guilty of providing praise. Okay, so when they're saying that they're learning how to do more affirmations, I get it. You know, it's sometimes a lot easier for me to kind of like give that little atta girl or atta boy, you know, instead of taking the time to really think about what it took for them to do what they did. Why is it, you know, that I want to encourage them, and how should I do it? You know, it takes a minute for me to kind of retrain myself or to reframe these things in my head so that it comes out as an affirmation. So, an example, the skill reframe or practical application. Instead of saying, good job staying sober this week, we can shift it to saying, you really showed commitment this week. That says a lot about what matters to you. So it's the same moment, but it lands very differently. It has a very different impact. So the best affirmations are the ones that actually link behavior to identity. So you kept showing up even when it was hard. That tells me that you're someone who doesn't give up easily. So affirmations don't really give confidence. What they're doing is that they're helping our clients recognize confidence that they already have. So as we continue building these MI skills, we realize that it's not just what we say, it's actually how it lands with the client. So if a client only feels good when we approve, they won't know what to do when we're not there. The people that are around them may not have known what the struggle is or what it took for them to get where they are. So if they're looking for that praise, they're probably not going to get it from anywhere. And if you're used to getting it externally, it's difficult to feel it internally. Motivation. So what we have to remember is that we do not install motivation. What we do is evoke it. Evocation means drawing out personal reasons for change. We're drawing out what is already inside the client. Instead of telling the clients why they should change, we help them discover their own reasons. And we remember, change is far more powerful when it's personal. So for example, instead of saying you need to stop drinking, as we said before, what we say is what concerns you most about your drinking right now. And when they say it, it's more likely that they will believe what they're hearing themselves say because it came from them. We're not saying you need to stop drinking because blah, blah, blah. They're saying this is how my drinking is affecting me. It actually helps clients to connect their behavior to what actually matters to them. Examples of this could be integrity, stability, health, family. So some clinical question examples. What kind of parent do you want to be? And what matters to you most right now? So when behavior and values don't match, the motivations, they begin to grow. And what we find is that motivation that comes from within is far more sustainable than motivation that comes from outside. I hear people say a lot, especially when I go to meetings. I still go to like my alumni meetings, and I'll hear people share sometimes, you know, um, you have to do this for you. It doesn't matter about anyone else. And I'm sure that there are some instances where that is possible. But what we have to realize is that motivations for change can change all the time, right? And if it's what they're doing to their family that is the one thing that is most prevalent at that point, then that's the personal reason that, or the value or the goal that we begin to build on. A lot of times, I've shared, or even in conversation with other people in recovery, and they said that, well, I know that I'm doing this, or I know that I did this because I had some legal issues, but I don't know what happened. Once I started going through the classes, or once I started going through my skills groups, once I started processing these things with my counselor or with my sponsor, I started noticing that this is something that I really wanted. So maybe it started out as an external thing, but that external reason that brought them into change, that brought them into treatment, or that brought them to us for our help could be the thing that keeps them there. So it may be an external motivating factor, but it still comes from within the client, a reason. They still have a reason to do it. So we're not pushing change, we're helping clients to feel the reasons for that change. And once they begin to hear their own reasons, when it aligns with their values, when it aligns with their goals, they naturally move toward commitment. So some questions we can ask them once they get to that point is, well, what do you think your next step might be? Or even, where does this leave you now? Commitment language signals readiness. So the writing reflex says, let me fix this for you. You've come to me, I've got the answers. We're going to do this treatment plan. I'm going to tell you exactly how you're going to get what it is that you want. Versus, help me understand what matters to you, because those are the things that are going to drive the direction that this treatment episode is going to go in. So right now, if you could just take the time, think about a client that you've worked with recently. What mattered most to them? And did they say it, or did you say it? His career, he said it. Okay, they said it. His romantic relationship, he was fixated on. Okay. Reunification with their children. They said it. I see a lot where they said that it was the client that actually said what it is that meant the most to them, what was more important to them. Exactly. He said a desire for autonomy. So people don't change because we give them reasons. They change because they discover their own. So when we combine evocation with our core skills, we move from directing change to guiding it. All right. Applied motivational interviewing practice, case progression. We're going to go through a few case practices. All right. This is where we actually get to the stuff that we haven't done before. Okay. Client James, 38, residential treatment, alcohol use disorder. Uses alcohol to manage stress, has relationship strain, and work consequences. The client statement: I know drinking is causing problems, but honestly, It is the only thing that helps me relax. So what do you hear in this statement? Give me an example of maybe change talk, sustained talk. What are you hearing? Sustained talk and contemplation stage, both change and sustain, ambivalence. Okay. So the change talk is, I know drinking is causing problems. And the sustained talk is, it's the only thing that helps me relax. And you're right, this is ambivalence because both sides are present. But here's where many clinicians go wrong. One could be, you need healthier coping skills. Well, you can have really healthy coping skills and still need healthier coping skills. So that's not necessarily, something that we would use to tell them. Or even, let's work on stress management instead. So what happens if we respond that way? Let's work on stress management instead, or you need healthier coping skills. Resistance, its directive doesn't reflect the change statement to promote more change. Judgment may cause the client to push back. It's not addressing what they need. The client will not trust the clinician. No empathy. Moving too fast through the stages of change, definitely. Resistance and controlling. Great. Yay. All right. So, as a motivational interviewing consistent response, so instead we use MI, right? Option one, drinking has been your way of coping with stress. And at the same time, you're starting to see the impact that it's having. That's reflection, the best first move. Option two, double-sided reflection. On one hand, it helps you relax. And on the other, it's creating problems in your relationship and work. Double-sided reflection. So there's no argument, there's no correction, just clarity. So if we want to pull out, if we want to evoke change talk, what could we ask next? Examples of what we could ask next. In what ways does your drinking contribute to your stress? What else have you tried in the past to help you relax? What are some of the ways you tried to relax? How do you feel about the situation? What would you like to see happen? Okay. So here are some other examples. What concerns you most about the impact that it's having? Another example, how does this fit with what you want for your relationship? One more, what do you make of those consequences at work? So what's happening here is that we are guiding him toward his own reasons. Some affirmation examples. It takes a lot of awareness to recognize both sides of this. And then as a follow-up question, where does that leave you right now? What happens is that this invites movement without any pressure. So let's practice. Type in the chat, what is one reflective response that you would give James? You are seeing how it helps and how it hurts you. What could go wrong if you continue using alcohol to relax? How do you feel about the situation? I believe you have the ability to change. You're aware of how this helps and how it hurts you. It sounds like you're struggling with the pros and cons of drinking. This sounds like you're being pulled in two different directions. So you want out of this conflict. I always want out of a conflict. It seems like there are costs and benefits with this way of coping. Okay. So what I'm hearing in the responses is that we are reflecting the change talk, the fact that they know the drinking is causing problems and we're focusing on that. We're staying neutral about it, and we're also avoiding fixing the situation. So we are not responsible for convincing James to change. What we are responsible for is to help James hear himself more clearly. When clients hear their own reasons for change, they begin to move, right? So in this one statement, I know drinking is causing problems, but honestly, it's the only thing that helps me relax. These are some things that we've gotten from it. We identified ambivalence. We avoided the writing reflex. We used reflection, and we evoked change talk. And that is motivational interviewing in action. Okay, case practice Maria with family impact. Maria, 42, is an IOP. She uses alcohol to cope with stress and loneliness. Her adult daughter has stopped speaking to her, and she reports feeling misunderstood and judged. I mean, I know my daughter is upset, but she doesn't understand how hard things have been for me. Change talk. I know my daughter is upset. Sustain talk. She doesn't understand me. So this is not resistance. What this is pain and ambivalence. So an example of reflection. It sounds like your relationship with your daughter really matters and you're feeling misunderstood right now. An example of double-sided reflection. Part of you sees how this is affecting your relationship, and part of you feels like your situation hasn't been fully understood. Some evoking questions. What do you wish was different in that relationship? What do you think she might be experiencing? How does this fit with the kind of relationship that you want with your daughter? So one thing that we can probably remember, I think this is an important thing, is that family pain is often one of the strongest drivers of change if we handle it with empathy. I know some of the mistakes that I've made, especially early on when as a counselor, was that I would just kind of take it at face value. Well, not totally. Well, be honest, Daryl. There were times where if they said, you know what, my family doesn't understand. I've done this so many times. They don't want to have anything to do with this. So, no, I don't want a family session. And to me, I was respecting their autonomy by saying, okay, no family session. But there are so many other things, tools that we can use to actually explore and to to bring out what it is about those relationships, how it's affecting them. And if that is something that they really want to change. What impact is this isolation from family having? And we can use MI to get to the heart of those issues. Darnell, low motivation. He's 29, he's an outpatient. Court mandated treatment. He denies having a problem. And only reason he's coming to treatment is to avoid legal consequences. I'm pretty sure none of you have ever experienced a client like Darnell, right? Okay, exactly. I would say a whole lot of them, right? So this is a good one. You worked for 21 years with court mandated. Oh, then you know this very well. Thank you for sharing that. What change talk do you hear in this statement? None. Okay. What sustained talk do you hear? The whole statement, all sustained talk. So there's no change talk present at all, or it's minimal. Actually, I don't see it. And the sustained talk is very strong. So when there's no change talk, our job is not persuasion. Our job is engagement. So some MI responses. You're here because it's required, not because you see a need to be. That's pretty much what he said. Amplified reflection. So from your perspective, this isn't really an issue at all. Can you give some examples of what some evoking questions could be? I hear you, Darnell, and can understand how you might feel about having to participate. What do you think you would like to obtain from this process to make it meaningful to you? What would you like out of this time together? How has this been going for you going through the legal process? Tell me more about what got you here. Oh, since you have to be here, what are some things you do want to talk about or work on? If you could guess, what do you think the court saw that was problematic? Okay. You guys came up with some really good evoking questions. Some other examples, actually, I think I may have even said these. What would have to happen for you to see this differently? What concerns, if any, have others brought up? And what do you want to get out of being here, if anything? Heard a lot of variations on that question. So, what's happening here is that we're not creating motivation yet. What we are doing, though, is that we are building engagement and trust. All right, we've got Kevin, 50, in residential treatment. He has a long history of alcohol use. Recently, he was sober for 2 weeks and he fears losing his identity and his social life. So the client's statement is this: I know I need to quit, but I don't even know who I am without drinking. What makes this complex? The change talk. I know I need to quit. The sustained talk is him expressing the fear of identity loss. So ambivalence is often about loss, not just behavior. Okay. So if we use reflection, we could say a part of you knows that change is needed, and another part is unsure of what life looks like without alcohol. Complex reflection. It's not just about quitting, it's about figuring out who you are without it. What are some examples of some evoking questions that we could use? Drinking has become so crucial to your identity that you're afraid of who you'd be without it. Who were you before drinking? Do you remember life before your first drink? Can you think of a time? Can you think of a time where you were not drinking? What were you like, or what did you like about being that person? What I'm hearing is grieving alcohol, and that's a difficult reality. You were sober for 2 weeks, which is remarkable, but how did you cope in the 2 weeks? Okay. What are some values that are important to you? Here are a few more examples. What are you most afraid of losing? What might you gain that you don't have right now? What would a different version of you look like? So, what we have to keep in mind is that change requires letting go, and that can feel like grief. Now, in my experience, in early recovery, and something that kind of held me back from coming to treatment was that so much of my life had revolved around that. High school, college, my friends, all of the gatherings. I had no idea what life would look like. And it was very scary, very scary. The loss of social life, thinking that I'm just going to have to walk away from everything and everyone that I already know. Very real feelings. Very real. Okay. Okay, so what did you notice in this? Which case felt more familiar? I don't know that MI actually talks about the dysregulation in the body. I think that would be more of a DBT type thing, but I'm not really sure. Mandated clients, pretty common. Also the hardest. The mother with the daughter. The one with all sustained talk. Yeah, that's hard. Next question. Where did you feel the urge to fix in responding to the clients? The whole time. Mandated client and the one who responds to stress. When they were ambivalent. Not immediately jumping to fixing. Okay. So when we're looking at the scenarios and thinking about the responses that you had, what was it that helped you to stay in motivational interviewing mode with the evocation? What tool, what skill? Boundaries, reflection, knowing that them coming up with answers will be more helping than me just giving them to them. Empathy and reflection, curiosity and empathy. Keeping in mind that what's going on with them is what's going to stick with them, their reasons. Practicing not interjecting myself, staying client-centered. Being mindful about what was going on with me and not just going with my first impulse. Okay. So the important thing to remember with this, well, before that, so we've got different clients. We have them in different stages, and we have different levels of motivation. But the same MI principles apply to all of them. So what we're learning here is that you don't need the perfect response. You just need the right approach. So what you notice is that none of these require you to argue, convince, or fix, right? And that's where the shift is. So let's talk about some communication traps that we need to avoid, okay? So this slide highlights some of the most common traps that can unintentionally disrupt the MI process. First, the writing reflex. This is our natural instinct as helpers, and we are helpers, to fix problems or offer solutions. So while it comes from a good place, it often leads to resistance. Instead, we want to pause and evoke the client's own ideas. Second would be arguing or confronting. When we try to convince a client that they have a problem, they will often defend the opposite position. So this strengthens sustained talk rather than evoking change talk, right? Third is the expert trap. Even with experience, motivational interviewing reminds us that the client is the expert on their own life. Our goal is to guide, not direct. Fourth, labeling. Labels can create shame or defensiveness and may change rapport. It could actually damage it. So motivational interviewing emphasizes person-centered, non-judgmental language. Finally, premature focus. Jumping into problem solving before the client is ready can shut down engagement. We need to meet the client where they are, especially where ambivalence is present. So instead of falling into those traps, we can actually just rely on the motivational interviewing principles. We resist the urge to fix and instead focus on evoking the client's own motivations. We aim to listen more than we talk, allowing space for clients to process and explore. We ask rather than tell, using open-ended questions to guide the conversation. We reflect rather than react, showing understanding and keeping the dialogue open. And most importantly, we support autonomy, reinforcing that change belongs to the client. This is not our process. This is theirs. So motivational interviewing isn't just for clinicians. It can be incredibly powerful for families and loved ones. When someone that you love is struggling, the natural response is to fix, convince, protect, and push for change. And while that comes from love, it can sometimes create even more resistance. One of the most powerful things that a loved one can do is to simply listen. Listening not to respond. Listening not to correct, but listening to understand. Some ways that we can help with that process as that loved one is to say, help me understand what this has been like for you. We know what it's been like for us, but just ask them, how has it been for you? We express empathy and not pressure. Empathy lowers defensiveness. Pressure increases it. For example, it sounds like things have been really overwhelming for you versus you really need to get it together. Connection comes before change. So we ask open-ended questions. Instead of telling them what to do, we ask questions that help them think. Some examples of those: what concerns you about what's been happening? What do you want things to look like moving forward? We reflect. We don't argue. Because when loved ones argue, the person often defends the behavior even more strongly. So instead of arguing, reflect what you hear. So the client could say, drinking just helps me relax. And the loved one, in reflecting that, could say, it's been your way of coping with stress. Feeling heard reduces the need to defend. We support autonomy. You can't force someone to change, but you can influence how safe they feel to consider it. One way we can do that is to say, I care about you, and I trust you to make your own decisions. And this doesn't mean that we're accepting harmful behavior. It means that we are respecting their ability to choose. As their loved ones, we often focus on what's going wrong. And motivational interviewing helps you to highlight what's actually going right. An example of this could be, I've seen you get through really hard things before. Another, you really care about your family, and that matters. Hope is a very powerful motivator. Instead of saying, you need to stop drinking, we could actually shift to saying, I've noticed some things that worry me, and I really care about you. Same concern, very different impact. Using motivational interviewing does not mean ignoring consequences. It does not mean avoiding boundaries. And it does not mean that we are accepting harmful behavior. It means communicating in a way that keeps the door open instead of pushing the person away. So think about a recent conversation with a loved one. What did you say that maybe wasn't using MI? You may want to. Okay, I told a friend that he needs to stay away from others that are using. Okay, so let's take the example. I told a friend that he needs to stay away from others that are using. How might someone say that sentence differently using MI? You might want to stay away from friends that are using. Have you thought about having fun without drinking? Have you thought of staying away from friends who are using? What do these friends mean to you? What do you lose or gain from keeping your current friend group? What do you think may happen if you're around people that are using? Have you noticed if your decisions about drinking or using are different when you're around different people? Okay. What do you enjoy about these friends and what do you not enjoy? Some really good responses. So something that we have to remember is that loved ones don't have the power to make someone change, but they have tremendous power to influence how safe someone feels to consider it. Let me say that again. We don't have the power to make them change, but what we do have is the power to influence how safe they feel to consider changing. And often, change begins in conversations that feel safe, respectful, and real. Our goal is not to win the conversation. Our goal is to keep the relationship strong enough to support change. This might be one of the most important slides that we have for families. And And for us clinicians that have family members, right? Because I know sometimes when I talk to my son, the clinician goes out the window. Well, not totally out the window. I've been doing a little bit better, but it takes a lot more for me to really think about it. Okay. So most of us have said at least one of these things. And it makes sense. When you're scared, frustrated, or hurt, you speak from emotion. But certain types of statements increase defensiveness and they shut down the conversation. Like I said, the goal is not to win the argument, the goal is to keep the conversation going. Example one, you need to stop. What happens or what might happen when someone hears you need to stop? Pushback, defensiveness, judgment. So instead, we say, I'm really concerned about you. Can we talk about what's going on? Same concern, but now it invites conversation. Woo. Example two, why can't you just stop? This creates shame and pressure. What makes this hard to change right now? This invites honesty instead of defensiveness. Example three, you're in denial. This labels and confronts. It sounds like part of you doesn't see this as a problem. This reflects without judgment. It's not just what you say, it's how it lands. So we notice the pattern in the am I consistent responses. There's more curiosity. There's less judgment. There's more reflection, and there's less control. So just to clarify, when it comes to the boundaries that we're having, this does not mean that you ignore the harmful behavior. You can still have boundaries, but you can communicate your boundaries without attacking your loved one. I care about you, and I can't support behavior that's harming you or the family. Okay? With the statements that are on here, but we have to remember that people don't hear concern when it's delivered as criticism. When conversations feel safer, people become more willing to be honest. Acceptance and respect. And this is where motivational interviewing becomes more than a skill set. It actually becomes a way of being with clients. Acceptance in MI does not mean that we agree with everything that a client does. Okay? It means we value them as a person without judgment. We can hold concern about behavior while still holding respect for the client. Many clients come into treatment. When they come in, they're experiencing criticism, they've been experiencing shame, and they've probably been hearing a lot about what's wrong with them. Not necessarily what they're doing, but what's wrong with them. And when they experience something different, they begin to open. Respect in MI means honoring this truth. Clients have the right to choose. Even when their choices are difficult, even when we don't agree, we respect their autonomy. Because when people feel that their freedom is threatened, they resist. But when autonomy is supported, they engage. When we combine acceptance and respect, we create something powerful, a space where clients feel safe, heard, understood. And in that space, clients are more willing to explore difficult truths and to consider change. People don't open up in environments where they feel judged. They open up in environments where they feel safe enough to be honest. So think about a time when you felt judged. Did it make you more open or more guarded? Guarded and defensive. Yes. Makes me double down. So our role is not to correct, convince, or control. Instead, we want to shift to understanding, respecting, and supporting. Acceptance doesn't lower expectations. It creates the conditions where change becomes possible. So when we bring acceptance and respect into our work, we're not just using MI, we're embodying it. If a client feels judged, they protect themselves. If they feel respected, they reveal themselves. As we begin to wrap up, let's bring this all together. These are the core ideas that I want you to walk away with. Meet clients where they are, not where we want them to be. Evoking motivation is more effective than imposing it. Listen carefully. Clients are already telling you why they might change. Reflect more than you direct. That alone will change your practice. And always support autonomy and self-efficacy. These aren't just techniques, they're a different way of engaging people in change. So for my clinicians, what does this look like tomorrow in your actual work? Use ORs, not just occasionally, but intentionally. Listen for change talk and build on it. When resistance shows up, don't push against it. We work with it. We help the clients connect their behavior to what matters most to them. And most importantly, stay curious, not corrective. Curiosity opens conversations. Correction closes them. So I want to ask you this. I want to leave you with this here, our final reflection. What is one thing that you will do differently because of this training? Remember, the spirit of MI is gentle, kind, and connecting. Use affirmations more than praise. Have more effective open-ended questions. Recognize change talk. Stay curious, listen more. Complex reflection. Understand the value of the clients. Whoop, missed that one. Ask more questions versus making statements. Okay. What is one skill that you can start using immediately? Evoking and reflecting questions. Acceptance. ORs. Acceptance. Standing with, not in opposition to. Okay. How might this change the way that you talk to clients or families? Staying with them in the stage of change that they're in, not rushing them to change, listening more and slowing down in responses. Operate with more humility, inviting more self initiated change and less defensiveness. Slow to speak and quick to listen intently. My final message: motivational interviewing is not about having the perfect words, it's about creating the right environment for change. People don't change because we tell them to, they change because they feel understood and because they begin to believe that change is possible. And sometimes that belief starts with us. Thank y'all for all the work that you do. This matters so much more than you know. Whew. Callie, can we take a couple of minutes? I want to look in the Q&A, and we can close this with a few questions or answers or reflections.
Yeah, that sounds great. You have a couple questions already there, but if anyone has another question for Darylyn, you can put it in the Q&A now. And just to answer a couple of you that have asked, we will send a copy of the PowerPoint next week. So if you want to, do you have access to the Q&A? Are you seeing that?
Yup. What do you say when it's hard to affirm because they think they're fine, their value is to play, and their closest people keep them from consequences and responsibilities because the risk of their autonomy is too scary? Um, is this the question to the person that we want to encourage, to the family member? I would think that if it's a family member that's hard to affirm their client, their loved ones, or they're keeping them from the consequences because the risk of their autonomy is too scary. Um, it's just to probably remind them that the risk of not trying to find something, like, we don't need to affirm what the client is doing, but we can affirm maybe situations in the past that they've been able to overcome, and then we remind them of that. Because the risk of not addressing it could be just as scary as the risk of giving them their autonomy, if that makes sense. Because some things, if I was afraid to confront people on their addiction, knowing that they're very sick. I'll use an example. If there's someone here as a client who is in an end stage, and each time they come in, the jaundice is worse. Um, I would say I would continue to affirm them for coming back, regardless of what the situation is. Affirm them for their perseverance, affirm them for their continued attempts, and to not ever um, minimize those efforts, regardless of what happens when they leave. How do we address psychoeducation with the trap of being an expert? I think that these are probably two different things. So even with psychoeducation, I think that more of as a general approach to the information that we're giving them versus an individual session with that conversation. Because I feel like when I'm doing psychoeducation, it's really for the purpose of education, of educating them, and not so much with the therapeutic side of it, I think. We get clients that start off loving groups and want to step down fast and control this due to the time it takes up to be in groups instead of looking at the need of support and putting their recovery as a priority. It's really hard to keep some of them engaged. Any advice? I think probably the in groups, the more interactive activities that we have, the better that we can keep them engaged. Finding different ways, you know, that we, when can we do part three? That's cute. We can find different ways. Like I spend a lot of time observing other clinicians and their groups and the things that they do, the activities that they put in place, the way that they engage them, um, and just really just kind of keeping that arsenal full, right? Um, Especially if we have clients that have been here before and they're really like engaged at the beginning, but they're like, well, you know what, I've already been through this. I'm ready to move on. I've had this part before. I've even had clients to tell me, I could probably teach this. Um, but if they're continuously exposed to methods that they haven't seen or activities that they haven't seen, or making games out of certain things or making competitions out of these things in groups, that they really tend to stay more in that space. Let's see. I'm not sure about the GLP medication having an effect on addictions. I don't know that really. We've looked a lot at. Um, I'm more familiar with clients who have actually had like bariatric surgery and the effect that it's had versus people that have been on GLPs or that are still on GLPs and how that's affecting them. If it's like lessening um, their cravings, things like that. I've been told that it does. Um, I know it definitely helped me with like my addiction to sugar and stress eating and things like that. But I think I started a little bit too late in the game to know whether or not with me, whether it would help with the effect on my cocaine addiction or on my alcoholism. I hope, that if it does, that it's been used, that it begins to be used and to be integrated into the treatment approaches.
I think what I've been reading is that it does have a positive effect on addiction, and it's like a side effect of it kind of numbs everything at that point. It kind of decreases a need for anything, but like with any of those kinds of fixes, like if you're not developing the tools and the knowledge of a deeper understanding as to where that comes from and how to like work through that on a more like integrated level, it's not a method for long-term recovery or to keep that away.
Yeah, kind of like with naltrexone, right? I could take naltrexone, but if I'm not still doing the talk therapy and if I'm not still doing my support groups, then what happens when I'm not on naltrexone and I already know what's definitely going to work for me and I have
Mhm.
no tools to combat it. How can you approach if you have tried this method a couple of times without luck? I think that probably there are if as long as you can keep the dialogue open, I think that eventually there will be something that will come up for the client that you'll be able to build on. As far as the change talk, I think the most important thing is that we don't close it, or we don't challenge them to the point where they shut down and we lose that connection. It may not happen the first few times. We can sometimes feel that, we can use MI ad nauseum, and do a really good job at evoking these things with the question. We can do the open-ended questions, we can do reflection, we can do a lot of those things. But we keep the dialogue open because hopefully eventually they will come up with that desire to change on their own. They'll come up with that reason on their own. You have a client, this is his seventh or eighth treatment, maybe, but every time he comes, he does accept and always be like, I want to live my life my way. And sadly, sometimes that's how it is. I had a client, a veteran, and they were here for like 45 days at the time. And every day that I would do a check-in in a process group, this was back when we just did regular process group and focused more on feelings than we did on the primary skills that we just recently got. Every time he would do his feelings check, and I'd say, okay, so and so, how do you feel? He says, I feel like this is day 22. Okay. I feel like I got 3 hots in a cot. I feel like I've got 2 hots in a cot. And then the day that he left, he said, thank you so much for your time. I got things to do. He There was nothing in the aftercare plan. He's like, I don't need no referrals. I'm about to go and get I can't really repeat what he said he was going to do, but I could do nothing but respect that. Because I also have to remember, like, this way of life is not for everybody. We can always want something better for them. But if they want what they're doing, they're going to want what they're doing. I just continue to try to plant that seed and make treatment as painless for as possible for him as I could, because it just still doesn't have to be this tug of war, right? There's a way that we can do it and still let them know, like they say in that Motel 6, I'll leave the light on for you.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, how do you stop a client from romanticizing their use? I think that if they have given a reason, if we have heard some change talk in there, that we focus on the change talk, because romanticizing tends to be sustained talk. Mm, I still got 5 questions. Let's see. How can we evoke trust for them to be honest with us as a case manager when they may have sanctions like jail potentially hanging over them? I see things like this, and even with people who have children in the system, and they're afraid that if we tell their probation officer, or if we tell their their child welfare worker that they're here, um, or if they are honest with us about their use. The only thing I that I say is that it's up to them, and I'll respect whatever they decide. But that it's been my experience that everybody wants you to be well. That the focus isn't just on punishing you. They also take into consideration before they make a determination like you need to be in prison or you need to lose custody of your children. The effort to change, making that effort to change, acknowledging that there's a problem, um, could be something that could become not a weapon against them, but it can be used um, and reframed as something positive that they're doing. Focusing on the desire to be sober, focusing on the desire to do something different and to live a life differently versus continuing what they're doing and just not getting any help at all and continuing to dodge those probation visits. Okay. Um, I think that's all I. Do I have any experience with mothers with substance exposed infants? I do. Um, even with that population, it's still. I think with all of these situations, um, as long as we're using the MI skills and using the tools, it really is just a matter of us, and I think I said this earlier, keeping that connection open long enough with them so that eventually, if they haven't come to change, that eventually they will.
There's this one about when do you refer out after ongoing sustained talk and haven't been able to move from pre-contemplation stage of change? So I guess it's asking like what is the cue to know when to refer?
Referring out, I think for us, it's that let's say when we go through and we see what their goals are, because some they really don't have. For some of them, the goal is just to complete treatment. So let's say there's in a treatment center where we are. If they've been going to the groups, um, they're taking their meds, they're complying with everything that the things that are on their treatment plan. Um, we actually it's kind of like it's maximum level achieved. I mean, they still complete even though we may not see the type of change that we would like to see, but they have met their goals. They've done what they were supposed to do, um, and then we talk to them about what their next steps are. Sometimes it won't even be the 30 days. Sometimes we may see it, after 15 or 20. And in addition to the sustained talk, we see the disengagement, not coming to groups, sleeping through groups, things like that, because we're not going to just take money for you to be sitting in a chair. We're going to discuss if this is not what's working for you, if this isn't, helping you to meet your goals, then what we want to do is to help them to be somewhere where they will. Um, so I think that really is just like a conversation with the client, you know. Um, Thank you, Callie. Like, I think that's okay answer.
I think
Well,
so.
I know that that's how I approach it.
Right. Yeah. I think it
You
is
know,
kind of it's kind of pushing that as far as you can, but also being realistic with the
Mhm.
clients and where they're at. So I think that's also a great place for us to end on that note, just to give you all a reminder. Evals will come to you right after this. So when I hit end webinar, you'll see an email from CEGO. Your evaluation will be in there, and then that certificate is just populated and goes into your attendee dashboard. So all that's in one place. If you attend other webinars with us, all that's kept in one place together, which is nice. And then the slides, resources that she mentioned. I'll go ahead and put a link to part one recording as well in case you want to go back and watch that. This recording, all of that will come to you next week in an email. And hope you all have a really wonderful weekend. Come see us again. We're back here next month. Thank you, Darlyn. Two webinars. We really appreciate you.
Yay! Thank y'all. I really do. Thank you all. Um, I've learned so much from the responses. I love the interaction. So thank you very much, and I hope that you all have a wonderful, safe weekend. And for those of you here in Texas, a dry weekend.
Right. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great day.